volunteers for this fabulous opportunity to exhibit our work and to speak to you. And thank you all for coming on a warm, gorgeous summer evening. Jewelry Dialogue. Louise and I met at a metals conference in Seattle a number of years ago. And as our friendship developed, we realized that we were working on very similar issues, but approaching them from different directions. And as we formed the Vancouver Metal Arts Association, the dialogue continued. And so it was just a natural flow that this show sort of concept appeared. We pitched it to the Craft Council in their exhibition proposals, and here we are. So without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to talk individually about our work, and then we'll talk a little bit about the photo jewelry dialogue that we had this weekend. Pardon me. We had an event this weekend on the island called Jewelry Dialogue, where we photographed people with our work. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to go back to the gallery and share our work with you. Mood lighting would be great. That's good. This guy.
I have a TV issue.
My work concentrates on themes of memory, impermanence, and cycles. I'm intrigued how memory transforms and imbues objects with a shadow-like quality, and it changes them. I'm interested in how jewelry is viewed on and off the body. My early work involved the use, my earlier work involved botanical materials, which are depicted in different stages of growth. And their seasons the seasons are metaphors for life cycles, birth, death, loss, and growth. This work is a floral language expressing my intimate world, extending into the realm of florography, the cryptic language of flowers. Florography is a tradition that's practiced in many cultures, but it really soared in interest in Victorian England and the United States in the 19th century. This language allowed senders to send flowers or bouquets of flowers to express feelings that they couldn't possibly say out loud. The circle is a recurring shape in my work. The circle is a universal symbol with a lot of different meanings. It represents the notions of totality, the self, the infinite, the eternity. The circle is also a symbol of boundary, enclosure, of completion, and returning cycles. The symbolism most familiar to us is the wedding ring. It symbols not just a pledge of eternal love, but the enclosure of your heart, a pledge of fidelity. Within my own work, it symbolizes the cycle of time, the rhythm of the universe, and the seasons and life cycles. I'm drawn to enameling because of its inherently sensual qualities. It's the perfect vehicle for expressing my conceptual ideas. It also allows me to express my propensity for color, detail, and rich surfaces. Like many artists, I work on an intuitive level. My approach to making is somewhat more like a journey. I start out and end up only by knowing where I'm going, by arriving at where I am. I often arrive there by finding that spot. Drawing and mark making are an intrinsic part of my practice. My background is in printmaking. And so I draw more as a means not to have a completed example of what I'm going to make, but rather a process in which becomes part of the work. The table becomes littered with little pieces as I piece them together, much like a jigsaw puzzle. In this process, I'm seeking the combination that transforms the work, that allows it to become complete. John Cage once said, "Nothing is a mistake. There is no win, no fail. There is only make." The work for this current show is a response to the place I live and from memories of growing up here. It's a study of place and time. I'm exploring cyclical themes of loss, repair, mending lives, mending clothes, mending bodies. Simple objects that are frequently overlooked really seduce me. I'm captivated by a memory or an impression that these objects leave upon us. The brooches are mementos. The visual influences include surface patterns, a flash of pleasure, those fleeting moments that we just almost pass by. Those are more important to me than the really big ones. The brooches are mementos of a visual experience, a flash of pleasure, and the marks surrounding us, the marks that make us who we are, the marks that mark us in our lives. In this series of work at the Craft House, I work on metal similarly to how I draw. I worked with a chasing punch and hammer directly. I'm not drawing onto the metal first. I allow the work to evolve rather intuitively, using fine layers of vitreous enamel, which is ground glass. I sift layers and fire them individually at about 1,500 degrees. And I allow the work to emerge rather spontaneously. I was born in Vancouver. I live near the ocean. I'm very inspired by the colors, the forms, the textures that the West Coast is. They are really part of my persona. They're part of my visual vocabulary. The running stitch lines are inspired by my interest in kantha embroidery. I traveled to India for about a month and became very inspired by this textile form, particularly when I was purchasing a piece of textile and the woman asked me, why was I simply not making this queen-size bedspread myself? And I can assure you, I have tried, but I won't be making any anytime soon. Around this same time, I received a huge, and I mean huge, I mean pickup truck load of table linen from my husband's aunt. And as I was washing and sorting it, I found that a number of the pieces had mending on them, and the mending was almost as beautiful as the textile. In some cases, it was more beautiful. It was a language of their own. And what really impressed me was the time that some woman had taken to preserve and honor these pieces of textiles. There's a similar care and attention in rebuilding our lives, our body. In a previous work that I did, I worked in a rehab facility, in a rehab setting, and I'm always admiring of how people put their lives back together after a huge trauma, how their families contribute to that, and the strength and commitment it takes. I'm using the marks that I create on the metal and the construction of these neck pieces as a metaphor for this rebuilding. For me, jewelry is the perfect language. It's a meaningful code, open for investigation. What triggers me is its symbolic value, the way that it carries a small message. Jewelry is a carrier of meaning. It can become a ritualized object. I see it as a dialogue between maker and a form of public art. There's first a dialogue between the material and the maker and the wearer, and finally the wearer and the viewer. I see the aspect of public art come into play when the piece is being worn. When it's worn, the wearer is often unable to see it, and people go up and touch you and like interact with you. I love that aspect. I'm intrigued by it. Jewelry as an art form continues to fascinate me. I'm going to turn it over to Louise to talk about her work.
Okay, thank you.
you. Thanks, Jan. It was interesting listening to what Jan just said, and there's so many parallels with my work that I didn't even realise, so we'll just start. So I started out not in jewellery, like Jan started in printmaking. I started out in sculpture in England in the early 90s, and this is one of my earliest pieces that I made as a student, using found objects, which were lost objects, single gloves that I picked up on my walk to school every day, and I started sewing them together. And if you sew gloves together, they start to make a round shape, so I made this big ball called bunch of fingers. And I installed it in a place where you might see a discarded glove. And at this time, doing my degree in sculpture in England, I was introduced to feminist art, and I started to work with feminist themes in my work, and I've continued to do that. So this was a piece about the sort of love-hate relationship I have with women's magazines, and fetishizing objects like makeup and handbags, purses, and things like that. And that handbag theme carried on. When I came to Canada, I studied jewellery at Alberta College of Art and Design. And this is one of my earlier pieces. It's a purse. It's non-functioning. It's made as a sort of iconic object, similar to the orb that's held by the reigning monarch when she or he gets her power. So it was about power, and who holds the power, and giving the power to the woman, perhaps. Yeah. So now, the Queen, we see this iconic shape, and that's what I used in that piece. Later on at Alberta College of Art and Design, I learned anodizing, and I really got into anodizing because I liked the colour, and I also like that. And aluminum is very light, so you can work really big with it. So these were brooches. This was a series of brooches I did that were really big, like about this big. Based on florography, the language of flowers. I didn't know about Jan's work at the time, but each brooch had a different meaning, and it was about giving the wearer a way of expressing themselves in this kind of discreet / not very discreet way. So I worked in anodized aluminum for a few years, and I graduated from ACAD and moved out here. And I had a studio object design. I had my work in some galleries in the States. And then I had children, and I stopped working altogether. I wanted to take a break from the anodizing, which is really toxic. But when I came back to making jewellery, I didn't want to go back to the anodizing. I felt that was too far in the past, but I wanted to work with the same kind of colour and scale that I've been working. And whilst I was, my kids were really small, I'd taken up this form of quilting called English paper piecing. I'll show you an example of it. So it's where, these are historical pictures from history of English paper piecing. They're kind of interesting because you use cut-out pieces of paper, and the fabric is basted onto it. Scraps, it's a way of being able to sew really delicate fabrics and stabilize them, and then the paper is removed. So I developed a way of making jewellery based on this technique, and this was the first piece I made. It's a neck piece, and I used a man's silk necktie that I just got from a thrift store. I didn't have money to burn on expensive materials, and I kind of wanted to be conscious about what I was using. So I use the neckties because they have that kind of luster and colour and vibrancy that the anodized aluminum has. And I created the structure in them, first using paper, but then I went on to using styrene, which is a kind of plastic that I cut. This is another piece with neckties called Charm Bracelet, referring to the charm quilt. That's 1,000 separate pieces of fabric sewn together to make a quilt. So here's that orb and scepter again. I started using flag fabric shortly after the neckties. I got scrap fabric from the flag factory in Vancouver, and I don't know how I just must have thought, the flag factory. I went down there, I got the fabric and started playing with it, and it worked really well for me. I liked the idea of using the flags, because I think jewellery can be almost like a flag. We use flags to communicate with each other, like the semaphore alphabet. I made this set of rings that are magnetic, and you can wear them in different ways, communicating with different expressions, different ideas. I was thinking about other ways that we wear jewellery all the time. Everyone's wearing jewellery all the time, it just may not be obviously jewellery. So men do wear jewellery, and I made this series of works of motor brooches using the flags for men, for an exhibition for men. And it was a series of brooches based on different motorcycle insignia. They're magnetic. You'll see the pieces in the show, the brooches are all magnetic. This piece, Satin Sheets, I was thinking about also, one of the big things I think about in my work is value and status, and jewellery throughout history has been seen as a status symbol and a way of showing our wealth and our status in society and using expensive materials. And the value in the jewellery is in the materials, but in art jewellery, in a lot of art jewellery today, the value is in the work, in the craftsmanship and in the ideas and in the concepts. So this piece is made from a horrible satin sheet from Valley Village. And it took me, that's all hand sewn, it's in the show, you can have a look at it. It took a long time to make, and it's quite expensive to buy. If anyone wants to buy it, it's very expensive because it took me a very long time to make. And the value is not in the materials. The body mapping brooches that is a series that I'm going to continue. It's taking symbols from maps. I'm thinking about the way jewellery, we might use it to direct people's gaze. So we might wear a necklace that draws attention to our face and maybe away from other places that some people look at. We want to direct people's gaze to that we're married. And it's about that, directing the gaze. I've started beading because I'm teaching at LaSalle College, and there's a beading part of the program, they learn beading, so I've been able to do some classes, which has been quite interesting. And these are some newer works that I'm going to continue with the beading. It's not got a fully realised series yet, but I'm kind of excited about doing more of that. So with this show, and the pieces I was going to make for this show, Jan has been a mentor to me, and I've really looked up to her, and she's really helped me a lot with my career in the 5 or 6 years that I've known her. So it's kind of intimidating for me to make work with and in response to Jan's work. So I looked at her circles, her O's, and I thought, how am I going to respond? What's my answer to her O's? And I thought, well, it's X. And then I started thinking about the mark of an X and mark making as well, because I haven't really used mark making in my work for a long time. So I was thinking about the crossing off of the calendar. Well, here's me starting this series, similar to Jan's workspace as well. And then I was thinking about, I was looking into some history of my own family, and there was a document, and it said something about he made his mark with the mark of the X or something, and it was about, and my mum said, oh, that means he couldn't write. But I was thinking about the idea of the X being your signature and your authorship of something. And jewellery, it's my mark, and I'm putting it on other people, or other people are choosing to put my mark on their own bodies, which is quite, I'm very grateful to those people who want to wear my work, because it's quite an intimate thing that they're taking my ideas and putting it onto their bodies, and maybe interpreting their own ideas through what I've done. And then, of course, as I was making this happened, and it was, I don't need to say anymore, the box with an X in it. So I started making these pieces. They are magnetic brooches. They fit exactly inside, or more or less inside Jan's circles. They're made from flag fabric, and they're all hand sewn and hand pieced, and each one is different. They're all different heights as well, so it depends how forceful you want to be when you wear this, so how much you want to push out there. And I made 20 like Jan. So, and then at the very end, Jan made me this piece, which I'm going to keep, it's not for sale, and I made Jan this piece.
It's not for sale.
So I think we're going to come over here and we're going to talk about what we did on Sunday, which was we had this camera and we set up the Citizens of Craft signs, and we had a craft council sign on a Sunday morning, and we laid out our work and we started interacting with the general public.
We started harassing the public. And we actually got an amazing response.
Yeah.
People, were a bit reticent at first, but then we got people like this young woman who jumped right in. She was very eager to participate.
And her parents.
Her parents got involved, and it just, the ball, once other people saw people doing it, they just really got into it. We could have had a whole film of this family.
Yeah.
They were just having a blast.
And they got to choose, but it was interesting to see different people, different personalities would choose different brooches, and some people were more reticent. Some people would only do it with somebody else, have their photograph taken together. And who would choose the white ones, the more sedate ones, or the very flat ones, who would choose the really big. And it was really, and people, we had a chance to talk about the materials and the process as well, which is always,
It was quite fascinating. We also got to hear their response to what the work was. It was wonderful to see the people's response to the surface. They were blown away that it was flag material, or that, a number of people, we had a number of ceramicists, we had a number of people who were from Copenhagen who knew what enamel was, and that wasn't enamel, it wasn't shiny, It had texture. How did we get those lines? So they asked great questions, were really involved in it. The children, this little guy in the blue hat was stroking all the brooches. It was great. They were very tactile and stroked them on the people. So it was very much
Yeah, we had the pictures out so people could see. People came and took pictures of their pictures, which then they put onto Instagram, so kind of that meta situation.
I think that was the only problem we had, particularly with the kids. They wanted to take their picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing that was really quite delightful was people who were reticent at first and said they weren't garbed in the right way to wear jewelry,
Yeah.
or the colors that they had on didn't match.
Yeah, she didn't want to do it, and then we put the brooch on her, and it looked so good. Well, I think it looks really good, that colour, and it's just shows people you can wear jewellery anytime, any place. Oh, the dog. Yeah, they were really nice.
Yeah, they were great.
So that's our dialogue, and we'd like to continue that dialogue with you right now if you have any questions, and then in the gallery.
Can we go by now?
Can you go by? Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you explain the magnetics? Because I didn't want to touch them in the gallery. So obviously the magnetics are something that are very
Jan, I'll take it off.
very
So
good.
yeah.
Okay.
So there's a rare earth magnets I use. They're about, I have different sizes for different pieces, but these ones are about this big, and they're only very thin, but they're really, really strong.
One goes inside.
One's inside,
Right.
and then I make a little, where's that little piece, Jan? A separate piece. They're different shapes for different pieces for the back. So it just
Just as nicely made.
Our
and they
install
kind of
crew.
snap, it has the satisfying snap. You can't see makeup or
Yes, and our
whatever.
install crew has said Louise has won the award for the easiest install.
Yeah, so that's the magnets. Yeah.
I assumed you didn't want to touching in the gallery, and that's why.
You can touch, you guys can
Yeah.
touch. You know, that's one thing with jewelry is jewelry exhibitions often is that people really want to touch it, and often it's behind glass. Hi, Hillary. Oh my gosh.
Are you closing the door because there's no light?
No, you can come in. You can come in. We're at the end. We're at the questions.
Sorry.
Yeah, come through to the. What was I just saying? Oh, the other reason for the magnets is that you can wear them on like a very lightweight. My work's very lightweight as well. So on a lightweight dress, it's not going to drag it down, and it's not going to make holes in the piece.
On a finer material.
Yeah.
How do yours, Jen, how do yours attach?
In a traditional two-stem pins.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can just lift them up off the wall and have a look at them.
Yeah.
too.
Just don't put the magnets in your purse near your credit card.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what did you two learn through the dialogue?
We learned, I think, a lot about each other.
Yeah.
I think I learned, different ways of exploring my own materials. Like, I don't think I would have pierced and sewed with silk on the brooch without, it was very much in the circle format and filling it up. So dividing it up in that mathematical way, it definitely made me look at my own work in different ways.
The mark making that I did on my brooches with embroidery, just running stitches, which was inspired by Jan's. I don't usually do that much embroidery on my pieces, although my mum's coming tonight and she's wearing a brooch I made a couple of years ago for her, and it does have that on it, so they did it once. But I did it for this and really explored it, because 20 different pieces, and I really enjoyed that process. It was really nice, and I'm going to continue to do that with my work. So that was a
I'm
nice
definitely going to
discovery.
continue the same with it. We were both talking about that when we were setting up and exchanging the piece that we made for each other, of what we will continue with and how it will explore. We've actually talked about how we can extend this dialogue in another show. So.
Yeah, and more.
And more.
And when we installed, it's only when you finally do the installation of the show and we saw the pieces together, and we experimented with how we were going to put them up, what the sequence was going to be. I felt like it was really exciting to see the work together. I was amazed at how complementary the work was together, because I didn't really think we were that similar.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, it was
We both
quite
liked
shocking
each
to
other's
me.
work, but we didn't realize how cohesive it was, and also that as a whole in an installation, what a code it made. And that was something else we wanted to explore perhaps in future work, is maybe we would be more deliberate in what we were trying to say, like the semaphore,
Yeah.
and what language we were trying to express.
It's a fascinating process, but I'm wondering, maybe for the next step, would you think about doing some collaborative pieces where there are two artists who produce?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we've talked
Yeah.
about that. That's
Yes.
the next
Yeah,
step.
Yeah, that would be the next step that we actually exchanged. And it was our original intention, but for a number of reasons, how
Yeah.
things, I was away for,
Oh, no, I just thought
Yeah.
it would be related to see.
yeah, I think it would be great.
Collaborated on some pieces.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about an exchange of source material, and I'm wondering, did that end up happening, or was that just something that was the original idea, or?
No, we did exchange, I sent Louise images of the needles. And at different times we got together, we showed each other, and I had been to Louise's house and saw the flag material, and so did more research on paper piecing.
Okay, I sort of felt like you had a material, you gave it to her, and she made jewelry out of it.
No,
No,
no.
my
So it
our
wasn't like
materials
that.
are
No.
completely.
Gotcha,
That's
okay.
what I've always.
I
been working on
misunderstood
yeah.
that part, yeah.
Although we have talked about perhaps doing that in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.